Okay, so I'd like to wrap up this discussion of competitive advantage and the resource-based view by highlighting some of the key insights and implications of the resource-based view. First, in the resource-based view, as I said earlier, strategy is all about building competitive advantage. And that means being better than all competitors in some way that customers value. The resource-based view and the perspective of competitive advantage really emphasizes the utter futility of competing against the same competitors in the same market space in the same way as they do. Because if you're not better in some way, then you can only compete on price. And competing on price is only profitable if your costs are significantly better than all your other competitors. So you need a competitive advantage of some kind. If you are not better in some way that the customers value in terms of differentiation, then you can only compete on price. But you can only compete on price successfully if you are better in terms of cost. So either way, you've got to be better in some way in order to have a competitive advantage. Okay, another set of implications has to do with the fact that to be better, you must do things differently. What do I mean by that? Well, it's not what you do best that matters among the things that you do. It's what you do better than every other competitor. Also, building competitive advantage requires you to defy your industry's orthodoxy and conventional wisdom about how to operate. Because if you are doing things according to orthodoxy, if you're doing things according to the industry's conventional wisdom, you're going to be operating the same way as everyone else, and you're not going to be able to be better. You're not going to have an advantage. So in order to have an advantage, you've got to go against the conventional wisdom in some way. And if you're afraid to do that, then you're never going to get an advantage. So what do you need to do? You need to develop unique strengths that rivals can't match. You need to limit the range of functions and activities that you perform within your company. And by that I mean you want to perform only those activities that contribute to your specific form of competitive advantage and outsource everything else. And you want to perform sets of activities that both support your competitive advantage and reinforce and support each other. What we're looking for here is a situation, as Porter showed in his activity diagrams for Southwest Airlines and IKEA and Vanguard. We're looking for a situation where the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, where the activities and resources as a whole in combination wind up being more valuable together than they are separately. So how do you do that? Well, first you want to focus on locating and acquiring control over those resources that are more valuable and useful to your company than to any other competitor. That is, you want resources that will enhance the value and productivity of your other existing resources. And you're looking here specifically for resources that will only help you, that wouldn't help your competitors, right? You're looking for resources that would improve only your specific form of competitive advantage, not theirs. Another set of implications has to do with the fact that not all resources generate a sustained competitive advantage. Okay, what kind of resources do and what don't? Well, a resource advantage is tougher to copy or steal and is easier to appropriate the profits from if it's ingrained in the company's culture, systems, and processes, not just in the individuals who can be hired away. If nobody else has the other complementary resources needed to maximize the value or productivity of that resource, and if it relies upon a complex combination of resources and activities that only work best together, that don't work as well separately. So, overall, sustainability depends upon all those factors I discussed earlier: durability, scarcity, imitability, substitutability, and appropriability. Those are the really core factors in the resource-based view. And so, what do you do with that? Well, one thing you should do is you should assess all of these factors as an integral part of every investment decision that you make. Whether you're a pharmaceutical firm trying to decide whether or not to invest in the development of a new drug, or whether you're a manufacturing firm trying to decide whether or not to invest in a new R&D project or a new plant, a new manufacturing facility. One of the things you need to do is to figure out, well, if this new investment is going to give me an advantage, how sustainable is that advantage, right? In your other classes, in your finance classes, you're learning or you're going to learn about net present value calculations, net present value decision rules. And the point there is to determine whether the flow of future cash flows to you from an investment outweighs in value, in present value, the amount of outlay that you have to put into that investment today. And the point I want to raise here is that strategic analysis must precede financial analysis, right? In order to know what numbers to put into that net present value calculation, you need to have first done a strategic analysis, right? Because if you are discounting back to the present a stream of future cash flows, you need to know how long is that stream of future cash flows going to go on, for example, right? And in order to determine how long that stream of future cash flows is going to continue, that's a question of sustainability. How long will that advantage be sustained? And that's not a financial question, that's a strategic question. So strategic analysis must precede financial analysis. Otherwise, all those fancy net present value calculations or discounted cash flow calculations that you do on your Excel spreadsheet in your finance class is just quantification of fiction or quantification of fantasy. I mean, just because it's in very precise numerical terms doesn't mean it's not fiction and fantasy. In order for that net present value discounted cash flow analysis to make sense and not be just a quantification of fantasy, you have to have done the strategic analysis first. You have to know how long that stream of future cash flows is going to last, which is a question of sustainability, which is a strategy question, not a finance question. And so before you even bother generating a net present value calculation or discounted cash flow calculation to help you come up with the answer to a particular investment decision about building a new plant or investing in a new pharmaceutical research or a new research and development project, you need to do the strategic analysis. You need to do the sustainability analysis. Okay, last set of implications here. No advantage is perfectly impregnable. And this is important to remember because the resource-based view is all about focusing our attention on what conditions will lead to sustained competitive advantage. But the reality is that nothing is sustained forever. It's just a matter of relatively how long will it last. Will it last 1 year? Will it last 10 years? Will it last 5 years? No advantage is going to last forever. The point is that competitors and potential competitors and producers of substitute products and services, they're not standing still while you're sitting on top of your advantage. So if you just sit on your laurels, if you're just standing still and sitting on your laurels in terms of the advantage that you've created, all those competitors, all those potential competitors, all those producers of substitute products who aren't standing still will eventually catch up and overtake you because they're not standing still. Most advantages require reinvestment of some type or another. You can't stand still. You have to be keeping up with the reinvestment, either periodically or continually. That may be investment in the form of developing a stream of improvements or innovations in order to stay one step ahead of the competition as they try to catch up to you. Or it may also require you to acquire or co-opt potential substitute products or services, or to shift to alternative markets that substitute products can't serve, because technological disruptions, as we'll examine later in the semester, can create a situation where substitutes overcome your product completely and overcome your resources completely, as almost happened in the example of Federal Express versus the fax machine, right? So this is how Federal Express survived. They shifted to an alternative market that the substitute couldn't serve, the delivery of goods. You cannot deliver goods through a fax machine. I want to relate this topic of the resource-based view and competitive advantage back to the overall message and theme of the course that I told you about in the introductory lecture. And that overall message was this, that superior performance requires both an attractive market opportunity and the capabilities and resources that are required to best serve the needs of that market opportunity. Even the most attractive market can be lost to competitors if you do not have the capabilities needed to serve the needs of that market opportunity. But on the other hand, it's also equally important to remember that developing great capabilities to serve an unattractive market can be a huge waste of money. It makes no sense to do the wrong thing perfectly. And as an illustration of that, let me remind you about the quotation from Warren Buffett. Buffett said, "When an industry with a reputation for bad economics meets a manager with a reputation for excellence, it's usually the industry that leaves with its reputation intact." So the point here being that it really is both the attractiveness of the market opportunity and the capabilities that you bring to bear to serve the needs of that market opportunity that are needed in order to achieve superior performance. It's both. Okay, I want to thank you for viewing this lecture all the way through. I greatly appreciate it, and that's it.